Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah. Amma ba'd. Brothers and sisters, Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to virtual Masjid Al-Farooq. And we have a lecture now, inshallah, for about an hour. So brothers and sisters, it will be myself giving it. Please excuse me, I didn't have as much time as I would have liked to prepare for it, so please bear with me. But we'll begin, inshallah. So today I wanted to share a hadith with you, very beautiful hadith, and one that has many lessons. So the hadith is actually from Sahih Al-Bukhari, and it's number 3472. If you're interested in as a reference, that's according to one numbering system. So it's a Sahih, authentic hadith, so it's important to us. And it goes like this, that Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu narrated that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Ishtara rajulun min rajulin aqaran lah," that a man bought a piece of land from another man. فوجد الرجل الذي اشترى العقار في عقاره جرة فيها ذهب. And the buyer found a jar filled with gold on the land. فقال له الذي اشترى العقار خذ ذهبك مني إنما اشتريت منك الأرض ولم أبتع منك الذهب. So the buyer went to the seller and said, "Take your gold back, as I have bought only the land from you, and I have not bought the gold from you." فقال الذي له الأرض إنما بعتك الأرض وما فيها. So the former owner, the seller of the land, said, "I have sold you the land and everything in it." فتحاكما إلى رجل فقال الذي تحاكما إليه ألكما ولد. So both of them took their case before a man to act as judge. And that arbitrator or judge asked the two of them, "Do any of you have children?" قال أحدهما لي غلام. One of them says, "I have a boy." وقال الآخر لي جارية. I have a girl. قال أنكحوا الغلام الجارية وأنفقوا على أنفسهما منه وتصدقا. So the man who was the arbitrator or the judge, he said, this was his recommendation, marry the boy to the girl and spend the money on both of them and give the rest as sadaqah. So this is the hadith number 342 in Sahih Al-Bukhari. So now, brothers and sisters, we want to go through and get some lessons, and there's many. We probably won't be able to go through them, but some of the main ones, inshallah. First of all, brothers and sisters, there's an overarching lesson that, you know, all the lessons are related to tarbiyah. So about you know, developing one's character, one's Islamic personality. Now, to proceed, one lesson is about Abu Hurairah radiyallahu anhu himself. So brothers and sisters, as has been said a number of times, that our children, they may know a lot, not just children, you know, many of us may know a lot about various celebrities or sports stars. It is very important, brothers and sisters, that we teach ourselves first and our children about these big Islamic personalities like the Sahaba and of course Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. So Abu Huraira, for instance, he narrated 5,374 ahadith of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. That's a huge number, and if I'm not mistaken, he actually narrated more ahadith than any other companion. So that is a huge achievement, brothers and sisters. This is a real hero. This is a real Islamic hero. To narrate that many hadith, memorize, etc. This is a true genius. This is an intellectual star, Abu Huraira. And under the circumstances, as we know, he was one of the very poor in Medina, without the facilities that modern day professors would have. Yet he narrated so many ahadith, brought them to us, alhamdulillah, by the will of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So we have to teach our children about our Islamic heroes, our Islamic personalities, and their achievements, so that they will be a real role model and a real example. Now, going on to other lessons, the next one. Now, as you can see, brothers and sisters, in the hadith, there is some doubt as to whom the gold belongs to. If we look at it, each one of them may have a claim over that jar of gold. And, if either of them took it, the other one is saying it's okay. So it's not like they're doing something outright wrong if they were to take it, because the other one is giving permission. But brothers and sisters, we can see that's not even good enough for them. So a few points here. Both men are willing to give up something very valuable. I mean, a jar of gold is not going to be a few pounds. It's going to be many, many pounds. And even by today's going rate of gold, it's going to be a huge sum of money today. And it was a huge sum of money at that time. So it's something very valuable, but they're not even flinching. So the first man finds this gold and he wants to return it right away. No question asked, no doubt in his mind, goes back and says, take your gold, I didn't buy this. And the other one is saying, the other one is willing to give up. He's being offered this gold back that was on his land originally, but he's saying, no, I sold you the land and everything is in it. So they're both willing to give up something very valuable. And brothers and sisters, this is because they're taking so much caution for the sake of their deen, the sake of being just, for the sake of being fair, to avoid any possibility of any wrongdoing, even unintentionally, accidentally. So they're ready to avoid something that's doubtful, although they may even have a right over it. Especially the other one, the opposite one of them is offering to the other. So brothers and sisters, this is an example of, if we follow this, we would be following the advice of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in one hadith where he said, ad-deenu nasiha, that the deen is a nasiha. And if we translate this, it actually means that our deen is sincerity. So the companions asked, قُلْنَا liman. So he said, to whom, Ya Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam said, lillahi wa li kitabihi wa li rasulihi wa li a'immatil muslimin wa ammatihim. So Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam replied, to Allah and to his book and to his messenger. So this is being sincere to Allah, his book and his messenger, meaning to follow and obey Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, follow the Quran and follow Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and also to be, following the leaders of the Muslims, and also sincerity to the common people of the Muslims. So here is a very excellent example of sincere conduct to others, to each other, that we should have. So the hadith reminds us, gives us a great example of how to conduct ourselves with each other, whether that's family or relatives or neighbors or anyone, any Muslim, or even towards anyone who's not Muslim. We could have a non-Muslim neighbor. We're supposed to have sincere conduct towards them. So it reminds us to put our deen first, not our wishes or desires, as these men put their deen first, even though there is something so valuable related to the dunya that they could have gotten. Now I have another example. The companions understood nasiha and how to apply this hadith very well, to actually apply it in real life, not just keep it as some words they've memorized from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. They would put it into practice in their daily lives. Now, before I go to the example, let us think of ourselves sometimes. When we go to buy something, we tend to haggle if the opportunity is there, because we want to try to get the best deal, the lowest price. But sometimes we may go a little bit too far. We may haggle to the point where maybe the seller is becoming unhappy, wants the sale, doesn't want the sale go by, but they feel that it's being unfair. This could happen. So how did the companions apply this in their daily lives, even in the simple example of just going out to buy something? So Jarir bin Abdullah, one of the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, bought a horse. So Jarir asked his servant to buy him a horse. So the servant went to the market, went to a seller, negotiated a price, and came to a mutual agreement that he could buy it for $300 on behalf of Jarir, radiallahu anhu. So he paid the seller 300 dinar and brought the horse back to Jarir. When Jarir found out, and that he paid, his servant paid 300 dinar, Jarir actually went to the market and to the same seller himself and started to renegotiate with the seller. But it's not what we might think. Jarir went back to the seller and said, this is worth 400 dinar. So the seller actually, of course, agreed, happy. When the seller agreed, you would think that the matter would end there, but Jarir didn't stop. He said, no, actually it's worth 500 dinar. So the seller, of course, naturally agreed, very happy. So Jarir didn't actually stop there. He kept going and going until Jarir ended up paying 800 dinar for a horse that was already agreed upon and bought by his servant for 300 dinar. So in other words, he's haggling in the opposite direction, the upward direction, to what we would do. So brothers and sisters, Jarir was asked, why would you do something like this? So Jarir explained. He said, I have made an oath of allegiance to Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam to do the following: to establish the salah, to give the zakah, and to make nasiha, meaning sincere conduct towards every Muslim. So in other words, Jarir wanted to make sure he does not harm, does not cheat, definitely does not cheat, does not, make the seller unhappy, that his conduct is completely sincere towards the seller. Now, brothers and sisters, another lesson that I might elaborate on in a minute, but I'll mention it here, that, how do you think the seller feels towards Jarir? Do you think after this episode that, do you think Jarir is a stranger anymore to the seller? Do you think that the seller now has this tremendous trust in Jarir, that He feels love and brotherhood towards Jarir. I think, of course, we all understand that, yes, absolutely, all those things are there. So what are these qualities of brotherhood and trust? What do they lead to? They lead to unity and a good relationship. So if we had this in all of our relationships, trust, brotherhood, we would have unity in our families and in the ummah at large. So you see how much wisdom there is in this hadith, these two hadith I've shared so far, that if we really want to solve any problems we have in disunity or poor relationships, we should act like, or remind ourselves of these examples of Jarir and the other two men. So, brothers and sisters, because what would happen in today's circumstances? We have to admit, brothers and sisters, that, probably, I'm not saying in all cases, of course, but there would be some certain circumstances where a Muslim would actually find the goal and just keep it quietly. In this day and age, and unfortunately it happens, among all human beings, among us as well, that sometimes there's a fight over something that clearly does not belong. So a brother is fighting for something or trying to take something that definitely does not belong to him. So what would happen in the case of this doubtful situation? So to these men, it was black and white. But in our case, sometimes if it was doubt, it might lead to even a bigger dispute. So I'm saying this by experience because we try to help these situations in the masjid, actually. That's why I know these situations do occur sometimes in our community. So another lesson, brothers and sisters, is this. This is very beautiful as well, that, they would not leave the matter. Like, they couldn't settle among themselves for one of them to take this, like, could be millions of dollars here. So they couldn't settle on that. So they didn't leave it, okay? They didn't leave the matter. They actually took it to a neutral arbitrator, as the hadith says, to a judge, to get some sort of judgment rather than fight over it. So, fighting is not an option. Even to give it to each other, fighting is not an option. So this is how true brothers behave. So they went to the trouble of finding a neutral arbitrator, okay? And that, of course, was a wise decision of itself, just to go to an arbitrator. And it was wise also that the decision was also a very nice decision. So this is a reminder, brothers and sisters, that if we ever have a dispute or a disagreement amongst each other, whether it's spouses, whether it's parents and children or anyone else, even if it doesn't seem serious, okay, we should look at this option of trying to get arbitration or mediation or somebody to intervene before something gets out of hand. So we can see, brothers and sisters, that this was a wise decision because it led to a very good solution. The problem was solved with so many benefits. So the first benefit, of course, is the problem was solved. Next, with so many benefits that both men were happy, they get to spend that money on their own children. Who wouldn't want that? So it's going to their both children who are now married. It's going to one family. And it'll be spent on their, inshallah, grandchildren. Also, the children benefit. And by following that recommendation, that solution, anything that's left over, they give it as sadaqah, inshallah, and the ajr for that. And also, brothers and sisters, instead of being dispute, they created this bond by offering up or refusing to take something so valuable and offering it to each other. So that was already, that great example of brotherhood was already there. But now they become family, okay, and they're happy together, and this unity and brotherhood becomes stronger between them. So brothers and sisters, once again, I wanted to mention how important this is, that it's important sometimes to have someone who's not part of the dispute, okay? Because the ones involved in the dispute, whether it's 2 or 3 or more, or whoever it is, they're emotionally involved. And sometimes when you're emotionally involved, sometimes you can't think straight, or of course, obviously, you're going to think from a one-sided perspective. So, and always an extra head that is neutral will always be better than all the heads that are involved in the dispute. So as you can see, it leads to better solutions in cases where maybe you don't come up with a solution, and in cases where, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbid, it could go from, you know, worse than not having a solution into actual fighting. So let us remember that, and at the masjid, that's why we make this a priority, so that, you know, we can help maintain good relations and good unity in our community. So another thing, brothers and sisters, which is pretty obvious, but I want to mention it, that this hadith is about al-wara', piety. So obviously these men both are being, you know, extra cautious with their deen. They're being pious. They're avoiding what is doubtful. And the hadith is also about al-qana'ah, which is contentment. Contentment. Contentment is something very, very important, brothers and sisters. If we're content, you know, it's as if we're rich right from that moment. As long as we're content with what we have and satisfied with what we have, can't we consider ourselves as rich as any rich person? If we're happy with the amount of food we have, whatever clothing we have, whatever shelter we have, don't we have everything that we need, just like a rich person would take it as, although the rich person may still think that they don't have everything they need. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam reminded us about this. He said, قَدْ أَفْلَحَ مَنْ أَسْلَمَ وَرُزِقَ كَفَافًا وَقَنَّعَهُ اللَّهُ بِمَا آتَاهُ. That Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, successful is the one who enters the fold of Islam and is provided with sustenance which is sufficient for his needs, and Allah makes him content with what he has bestowed upon him. So alhamdulillah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gave us our deen of Islam, and for most of us, alhamdulillah, we have sufficient rizq, and alhamdulillah, we're in the month of Ramadan and we're talking about this. It's reminding us about the situation where, you know, our brothers and sisters don't have enough rizq, okay? So the third point is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala gives us a great blessing, that he makes us content, gives us contentment. If we have that, we have everything, and indeed we are truly rich. The hadith also teaches us, another lesson is that wealth and purity of the soul is far more valuable than the wealth of the dunya. So these men are trying to maintain the purity of the soul. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said about that, ليس الغنى عن كثرة العرض ولكن الغنى غنى النفس. He said, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, richness is not having many possessions, but richness, rather, true richness, is the richness of the soul, of which this is one example. Brothers and sisters, just a reminder again, I mentioned this about brotherhood and unity. These men had no desire for wealth, but they had a strong desire for justice, for fairness, and for brotherhood. They had a desire which should remind us of selflessness and preferring our brother in Islam, or even our relative, over oneself. And that's exactly what they did. They preferred each other over their own selves. And in the end, alhamdulillah, they got something that benefited both of them. So brothers and sisters, obviously they will trust each other, and this will make the love, the brotherhood, and the unity stronger. Now, if we could replicate that in our own relationships, families, and the ummah, we will have a strong, united ummah. Now, brothers and sisters, I come to one of the very main lessons of this hadith. I want you to reflect for a moment. What do you think this hadith is in reality? What do you think this hadith is in reality? In reality, brothers and sisters, this hadith is a story. So a story, as you know, has characters, has a plot, and a good story has plot twists, it has surprises. So, alhamdulillah, this is a story told by Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we see that it's a very good story, a very short one, but a very, very good story. There are so many more lessons that we could get from this. We don't have time. But, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told this story, and there's many surprises in this story. First of all, we would expect that the buyer of the land would keep the gold, wouldn't even say anything about it. So the surprise is that he wants to offer it back. And we would expect that the seller would be so grateful, didn't know that the gold was there, he forgot about it or whatever it was, and just take the gold back. But that didn't happen either. Then we're further surprised that they went to the trouble of getting a neutral arbitrator. Then we're surprised again, there's another plot twist in this very short story, that what does having children have to do with the solution to this problem? So brothers and sisters, all these surprises are, the characteristics of a good story, and we're going to discuss why in a minute, inshallah. So as we can see, a story, brothers and sisters, teaches lessons. And in this case, the beauty of this hadith is the lesson itself, one of the lessons itself is to use stories. And why is that? It's because, brothers and sisters, if we just think about it rationally, al-qissa, or stories, is one of the most important, strongest, effective methods of tarbiyah that we have. And what's the proof of this? There's many proofs. One of them is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala commands us to tell stories, okay? And good stories, useful stories. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has told us so many stories in the Quran as well. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَقْصُصِ الْقَصَصِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَفَكَّرُونَ. So relate the stories, perhaps they may reflect. And elsewhere, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, لَقَدْ كَانَ فِي قَصَصِهِمْ إِبْرَةٌ لِأُولِي الْأَلْبَابِ. Indeed, in their stories, there is a lesson for men of understanding. So stories, brothers and sisters, is one of the tools of tarbiyah that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam used very often, and I only gave you one example. Even the Salaf, they considered stories to be very important for all the reasons that we discussed so far. So Imam Abu Hanifa, he actually said, Al-Hikayatu عن العلماء ومحاسنهم أحب إلي من لأنها آداب القوم. Stories about the scholars and their good qualities are more beloved to me than fiqh, because they are the ethics or the morals of the people. So you can learn so much from these stories. So what's the benefits? I think it's clear to you, but brothers and sisters, why is this the case? First of all, we all love a good story. I don't think there's any of us who doesn't love a good story. You can raise your hand if you don't love a good story. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala created us that way. That's why he told us stories. That's why Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam telling us stories. Okay, and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling us to share stories that are beneficial. It's in our nature to love stories. And what we love impacts our heart. So since we love stories, a good story, it will impact our heart. So that's why the stories of the Quran, the stories that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, we love them. So it impacts us, impacts our hearts, and we hope that we get good lessons from that. And stories are good for everyone. Doesn't matter their age. Could be an adult, could be your children, could be your grandchildren. Doesn't matter where they're from, what the person's color is, what their race is. Doesn't matter what time or age they're living in. You know, stories are so timeless. Could have an old story, okay, and it could be very beneficial. So the other thing is, I hope, like in this hadith, that although probably we did it very, very quickly, we didn't even notice it, but we were thinking. The stories, especially the ones with these surprises and plot twists, they make us think, they make us use our mind, make us use our imagination. And as I said, probably we were doing it very quickly, but we were saying to ourselves, what does children have to do with the solution? Okay. So when we think and we ponder, okay, it makes us remember stories. That's why we're able to remember stories much more easily than other things like texts and things like that. And this is the point. This is one of the benefits that we want to achieve. We want to be able to remember the story. As one scholar said, the words may be forgotten, but the events will never be forgotten. So you may, forget the specific words of this story or this hadith, but you will remember the lessons, okay, and the events around this story, inshallah. And you tend to remember them the more you reflect, and the more you like the story, the more you love the story, the longer it will stay with you, the longer you will remember it. So if the story is teaching all these good things about brotherhood, about unity, about trust, about qana'ah, about honesty, okay, then we should remember all these things. It should become part of our system, it should be on our mind all the time. And of course, that's a huge benefit if we're remembering all these good characteristics of our deen. Now, especially why they're beneficial to children, brothers and sisters, is because, even as adults, sometimes, we may forget the story that's told to us as an adult, but it would be very rare that a child forgets a good story. So if we tell them good stories of the Quran, good stories of the prophets, good stories from our deen, good stories that Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam has told us, they will never, inshallah, forget them. Even if they don't understand them at the time or the lessons, they will remember that story and they will never forget it. And inshallah, because they learned it as children, it will become part of their nature. The lessons, if they can understand some of them at that time, it will become part of their nature, kind of like their programming, because they're like computers. They'll pick up things so quickly. Even if they don't understand the lesson, brothers and sisters, they will have memorized the words and they can go back to refer to them when life situations come or tests come. They can remind themselves from the lessons of the story and start to understand them. So it'll become part of their character, help them build a good character and good habits. So this is why this whole overarching lesson here is about tarbiyah. So you can relate to this. I think anything good that you were taught at an early age, all of us were taught many good things by our parents at an early age. You can bear witness to this, that you still remember them, their habits. You do these good habits without even thinking about them. Okay, you don't even have to make an effort. You're just doing them automatically. Whereas, those that things, maybe some sunan that we weren't aware of, and now we learn them as adults at a later age, we tend maybe sometimes to forget. They're not really habits. We have to work hard to make them habits. Okay, and sometimes we may lapse out of practicing that sunnah, whatever it is. Okay, we have to work at it. Whereas the things we were taught as children, I'm sure you agree, We don't even have to work at it. They're automatic. They're second nature. Now, the other thing, brothers and sisters, another lesson is the question is the use of stories and their benefits limited to children only? I think we've mentioned this, but I just wanted to mention this explicitly again, that who was the audience of the story quoted in this hadith that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam shared? Were they children? They were definitely not children. They were the companions of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, not just any adults. They were experienced men, experienced in life, hardened by life, living in the desert. Okay, they were masters. Some of them were masters of literature. Okay, so this story taught so many lessons that are worthy of everyone, adults, children, everyone. So let us not think that stories are just to tell children. Now, another benefit, brothers and sisters, the benefit is for the storyteller as well. So, of course, if we share a good story of the Quran, and a story of the prophets, Sahaba, stories that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam told, stories from the seerah of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, of course, we are giving tarbiyah. We are giving good advice, okay? So there's a lot of ajr from that perspective that, is huge, inshallah, because we're doing our duty towards each other of giving advice, good lessons, and the list goes on and on. There's another benefit I wanted to highlight, that inshallah, the children, your children, if you share stories, nice stories that they love and teaches them good lessons, they will remember it and appreciate you for it and remember you for the rest of their lives. Okay. And I think you can all relate to this. Whatever stories, good stories, especially the ones from Islam that your parents taught you, I'm sure, even though you're grown up, you have maybe your own children, you still remember your parents and appreciate them for teaching you these good lessons. And they will appreciate more and more because some of these lessons, brothers and sisters, we might take a lifetime to truly understand them. Okay, so sometimes it takes many, many years, decades to learn some of the lessons that the hadith, the hadith I started with. Sometimes it takes a very long time for us to, develop those habits. Okay, so every time, we go back, we remember our parents told us that we should behave like this. And now we finally, let's say it took us a while to make that into a habit. I'm sure we'll remember our parents and make dua for them. Even if they've passed away, we'll continue to remember them and continue to make dua for them. And we will pass these stories on to our children and we'll get the ajr and our parents will get the ajr. Even my own example, my father passed away a long time ago, rahimahullah. I still remember, although he was a very busy man, the little time that he had, he would share these type of stories. So I remember those days till today. The short time that he had was very valuable. And I remember the stories that he taught me. So I think there's great benefit for the storyteller as well. Brothers and sisters, I wanted to end with another hadith. I think we have time for it. Ibn Abbas radiyallahu anhuma said, one day I was riding behind Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam and he said to me, "O young man, I shall teach you some words," meaning of advice. "Be mindful of Allah and Allah will protect you. Be mindful of Allah and you will find him in front of you. If you ask of Allah. If you seek help from Allah. know that if the nation were to gather together to benefit you with something, they would not benefit you with anything except that which Allah has already recorded for you. If they gathered to harm you by something, they would not be able to harm you by anything except what Allah had already recorded against you. The pens have been lifted and the pages have dried. Brothers and sisters, you all know this hadith. I think it's hadith number 19 in Imam an-Nawawi's 40. So some lessons here related to what we're talking about tarbiyah and stories. Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, actually, the wording of the hadith is when Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam starts talking to him, he says, "O young man," meaning he said, "Ya ghulam, ya ghulam, O young man." If we look at the word ghulam in Arabic, it refers to an age that cannot be more than 10 years old, maybe 8, 9, 10, something like that. So Ibn Abbas here, from this, there's evidence that Ibn Abbas is a child when he's hearing, at the time he's hearing these words of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam. Now, brothers and sisters, here's my point. Do you think Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhu understand all of the words of Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam in this hadith at that age, whatever it is, 9, 10 years old? Here's a boy who has not even reached the age of puberty. He's not an adult for sure. Yet these are some of the most fundamental aspects of Islam, some of the heaviest principles of our deen. You know, this hadith, the words are related to having sabr, hardship, qada wal qadar. I mean, we as adults have trouble or difficulty grasping these concepts and principles from this hadith. We, as I said, might go through a lifetime and not fully understand these concepts, okay? You know, just the fact that, you know, we have to rely on Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that nothing's going to happen without what he's written. Sometimes we have to remind ourselves of that. We get scared sometimes, okay? Ibn al-Jawzi, about this hadith, it's so heavy that he said, I pondered over this hadith and it amazed me to the point that I almost became lightheaded. Meaning he became dizzy, almost fainted. You know, this is how heavy this hadith is, how the principles are so deep. So maybe Ibn Abbas, radiallahu anhuma, you know, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knows better, understood some of it, okay? Wasn't like an infant either. But to fully understand, we can say he did not. But did this stop Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam? Here's the point. Did this stop Rasulullah Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam from giving those words to Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma? He still gave those words. And the scholars have tried to explain why that is the case. That because at least Ibn Abbas, if he didn't understand all the words, he's been taught those words. They're in his memory. They're part of his database. They're part of his system. They're there for him, and he will learn them over time. As he faces life situations, tests from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he will have to come back to these words. They'll already be there. He won't have to search for those words. He won't have to remind himself of the word. They're with him all the time. So, and we, you know, so let us, in other words, we're saying, don't be shy to teach your children things that maybe they might not quite understand at that time. And this is the proof. So brothers and sisters, I think this is the end. Sorry, it's not one full hour, but I think this is all I have time to cover. The last 10 days, it's getting very, very busy. So I'll stop here. I hope it was clear. Any feedback is appreciated as always. If you have any questions, maybe it's better that, inshallah, if you could maybe send an email to admin@masjidfarooq.com, and I'll try to get to it, inshallah. So brothers and sisters, as I said, this time is a little bit tight, so I will stop here, inshallah. So once again, brothers and sisters, Jazakum khairan for your time and your attention and for your support always. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us, all of our fasting and all of our ibadats. And brothers and sisters, keep in mind, inshallah, that we still have these programs, this program going. This week it'll be Monday to Thursday, inshallah. And it will be it will be may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala accept from all of us. So we'll go from Monday to Thursday this week, inshallah, and the program will start at 7:30 because it's a weekday, inshallah. And of course, we have the daily adhan live streamed, and we have the daily tilawa starting at 9:45, inshallah. And keep in mind, we have Khatam al-Quran, inshallah, on the 29th night, which is Thursday. So if you'd like to join us for that. Jazakumullah khairan. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.